So without further ado, I just want to introduce Steve. Steve joined Mosaic Campus Church as the lead pastor in 2017 and as well as chaplain at MUNL. And Steve and his wife, Rebecca, they consider it one of the greatest joys of their lives, the journey with young adults as they continue to discover what it means to live in an authentic faith. And they live in our beautiful daughters, Lennon and Sadie, and their puppy, Milo. And Mosaic is one of the churches that we support through our missions giving. We have been personally impacted because we have students who lead in youth, who lead in a variety of different ways, who have sat under Steve and Rebecca's ministry at Mosaic and have a campus ministry that builds up students to be Christ-like followers and to be able to send them off to churches. We have been a benefit of that. We have leaders who have sat under that, where you could tell that integral discipleship piece in their lives has been instilled in them already. And Steve doesn't just do that for our church. There are tons of students in the city, across the province, probably even across the country and globe, who are impacted by his ministry and who go back home to work, and they are able to work in their local churches. So we are incredibly excited. Again, he's a phenomenal speaker. Everybody give it up for Steve Grimes as he comes.
Thank you, Greg. You are too kind, my friend. I think I was here last summer, and I don't think Greg and Rebecca were here yet. But isn't Greg and Rebecca the best? Yeah, right? I mean, his mom is back there clapping, which if she wasn't, there would be issues, I'm sure. But Greg, Rebecca too, but Greg for sure, we've gotten to work close together in different areas. But Greg is just one of the most solid people I know. And this church is just truly blessed to have Greg and Rebecca here. So it's cool to see you here, man, and leading and doing your thing. Isaiah's all right, too, but I'm going to pump up Greg. No, Isaiah's great, but just had to highlight Greg because he's just a good friend. I really appreciate everything he's doing. It's so good to be here this morning. If you saw that I was speaking once you got here and you want some time to go because you don't want to hear me again, some of you have heard me too many times, you can head out the back. I will not be offended. But it is so good to be here with you this morning. Spruce has just a near and dear place in our hearts. I did my internship here in 2014, and so it's cool to see some familiar faces here and a lot of new faces as well. Which is really cool. And it's awesome to see just Paul Snow just holding down the fort in the back, as always. Currently, Greg mentioned it, I'm currently a chaplain at Memorial University and pastor of Mosaic Campus Church. So it's a church for about 18 to 25-ish year olds. There's some ones that are a little bit older than 25. And then we also welcome, especially starting this summer, any grade 12s. If you're going to grade 12 in September and you want to check out Mosaic, you can start hanging out with us this summer. We'd love to have you. But there's kind of three things Mosaic is really focused on. One is just creating this come on in atmosphere, which is very similar to what Spruce builds a lot of their values around as well, but just making sure everything we do, anybody and everybody can come on in and feel welcomed. And then another thing that's a big part of it is our Mosaic Cares initiative, which is just basically our whole outreach wing of Mosaic, whether it's doing food drives for the MUNL Campus Food Bank. We do hydration stations at the campus bar for their open mic nights, just different things that we can just kind of bless the Memorial community in that way. And then the last one is Explore Authentic Spirituality, which is just basically exploring what it can mean to be in an authentic relationship with Jesus. And thanks to churches like Spruce, we're able to do that week in and week out. Before we get anywhere, I just want to say a huge thank you to you and your generosity. There's a couple churches on the island. Bethesda, just down the road, is another one that supports what we do financially, but in many other ways as well. So I mean it from the bottom of my heart. This is not a sales pitch. This is just plain thankfulness and great gratitude for your generosity, because there's some really great things happening on MUN's campus, and that's not because of me. It's all because of God and your generosity. So thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. And I need to just kind of tip my cap to Dave Newman, who sat in the back there. Dave was one of the people who brought Mosaic to MUN. He was a chaplain there for many years, so a lot of what Mosaic and MUN chaplaincy is today is because of him. So thank you, Dr. Newman. We are talking about a story in a book of the Bible called Luke this morning. So if you have a Bible, you can go there with me. It'll be on the screen as well. But we're talking about exceeding expectations. Exceeding our expectations. Have you ever been part of an experience, an event? I don't know what other words we could describe it, but something that you've taken in and it's really just blown your mind, or maybe it's been very underwhelming. Right? You're going into it thinking this is going to be probably the highlight of my 2023, and it's like the lowest point of your life kind of thing. These experiences we had where maybe they exceed our expectations in either a good way or a bad way. On Friday, November 23rd, 2018, my wife and I got a puppy, and you can go to the next slide. This is our family here. So that's my wife, Rebecca, if you haven't met her, and our 2.5-year-old Lennon, and then Sadie's in my arms. She's turned 6 months this month, I'm pretty sure, yeah. And that's the angel, Milo, who knows how to pose for a picture really, really well. You can tell that he's taken a lot of Instagram photos. But we got him in 2018, and so before it happened, we kind of decided, okay, we want to get a dog. We really wanted to get a cockapoo, which is what he is. All the kids love that name, obviously. But we really wanted this breed of dog. We're not like the most like adventurous outdoor people. Like we like to get outdoors, but like not go on hikes. And so we need a dog to kind of match our lifestyle that way. So a big, Portuguese water dog is not kind of what we're going to be doing. And so a cockapoo was that. And one of our friends had one from this breeder, and we absolutely loved it. So we said, let's get on a list for a cockapoo. And so we got put on the list, and we were told it could be up to 6 months or 2 years before we would hear anything. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that's great. I got lots of time to prepare my head, wrap my whole life around this, figure it out. I had a dog growing up, so I knew a little bit about, but I was one of those kids that was like, yeah, I'll feed it every day. I'll pick up all of its accidents and all this stuff, and I didn't do much of it. But I was kind of knew what we were getting into, but definitely not fully. But it was this kind of like fairy tale dream of, man, we're finally going to get a dog. We can't wait. But I had some time to wrap my head around it. But there was a lot of expectation in getting this dog. So we're on this list, and I think it might have been 2 weeks later, we hear from the breeder. And the breeder's like, hey, I got a dog for you. And I'm like, what? No, I need time. I need to wrap my head around this. I know what is involved in this a little bit. I can't get this dog right now. No. And my wife's like, hey, he's coming tomorrow. Let's go, right? She's so excited. And so in November of 2018, we get Milo. And again, it's kind of this fairy tale. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to get so many slow-mo videos of his ears just flapping as he's running back with a toy. We're going to have such a good time. And it was not a good time. We get our dog, and our whole lives completely just blew up. Okay? If you're thinking about getting a dog, I'm not going to sell it for you here this morning. I apologize. But our whole lives just blew up from that very moment. Because it literally was, he'd wake up at 5 a.m., maybe 6 a.m., maybe 6:30 if we're lucky. And hopefully you cross your fingers that he hasn't done anything. He'll actually wake you up because he's got this puppy breath that smells like stale coffee. And so you roll over, and we had him on a table next to my head for the first few weeks. And you roll over, and he's just breathing stale coffee breath at you at 5:30 in the morning. And we get him up and we take him outside. He won't do his business outside. Bring him inside. He does his business inside because he loves to do it inside. You clean it up. You try and feed him. He won't eat his food. Try to play with him. He has another accident because he just got so excited and he can't control anything at all. So you clean up the accident. Try to feed him again. Throw a toy around for a few hours. Try to take him outside. He won't do it inside. Before you get your boots off inside, he's done it inside. And so you got to clean it up inside. And it's just over and over. And then he keeps having accidents. You're thinking, this dog hasn't eaten yet today. How is he having accidents? This doesn't make sense. I eat, and then I need to go to the washroom. He doesn't eat. He still needs to go to the washroom. What is happening with this dog? He naps for an hour. Thank goodness. Wakes up, you throw a toy, clean up accidents, finally go to bed, and pray that he doesn't wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't you want a dog? It completely exceeded our expectations, but definitely not the way that we were thinking. There was no time for the slow-mo videos of his ears flapping in the wind. That happens now sometimes, but he's still not necessarily an angel, so I'm still cleaning up accidents every now and then. But it definitely was not what we were expecting. And there's this story in the Bible where we read about a man named Peter who has an interaction with Jesus. And Jesus looks at his life and says, hey, a partnership with me can exceed any expectations that you can have in your life. And we're going to look at it and see what that can mean for us today. And so before we get into the story, this man, Peter, he was a fisherman. He's a very well-known character in the New Testament, which is the second half of the Bible. And so Peter is a key figure, and I'm pretty sure besides Jesus, his name is mentioned the most in the New Testament, if not one of the most times. So he's prominent in the whole New Testament. Very important. Peter was like a spokesperson on behalf of the disciples, who were the 12 guys that followed Jesus everywhere while he was here on earth. And so if they had like a common question as a group, Peter was the guy that was always voluntold to go and ask Jesus the question. Or if they needed a point of clarity of what Jesus said because they were confused, and they were confused a lot, you can read about it, Peter was the one that asked the question that probably wasn't the smartest question in the room, and he took a lot of brunt of the teachings. But we have these incredible encounters of Peter's life, and one of these ones where Peter actually meets Jesus for the first time is one of the most impactful ones, that if we take and apply to our lives, it can help our lives be something that can exceed our own expectations. Luke 5, verse 1 to 11, it says this. One day as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. He noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push it out into the water. So he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, now go out where it is deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. And this time their nets were so full of fish they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with the fish and on the verge of sinking. And when Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." For he was awestruck by the number of fish they had caught, as were the others with him. His partner, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. And Jesus replied to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. So Jesus' life on earth at this point is really picking up steam. It's kind of at the beginning of Jesus' start of his ministry. And so he's doing a lot of teaching, preaching, healing, and because of all of those things, he's starting to create quite a crowd that's following him everywhere he goes. And so Jesus is traveling in this place called Judea, and he comes across this sea called the Sea of Galilee. And he starts to walk up there, and this whole kind of area was a major fishing industry. And so you would go there and you would see so many people either fixing their boats, fixing their nets, coming in from fishing all night, those kinds of things. And Jesus goes up to the Sea of Galilee, and you can see some people who may not have had as much money as other fishermen. They're casting nets from shore to hopefully catch some fish. And after a long night of fishing, you see a bunch of men coming in from shore on their boats, and they're kind of packing up. They're done for the night. Here, because Jesus is there with a huge crowd around him. It's like if Harry Styles walked up to St. John's Harbor. Like it was just so many. If Harry Styles, the Beatles, very similar, okay? Just a very popular person, right? So many people are showing up, and they're like, "What is going on? You know, these fish are great, but they're not that great." And Jesus shows up, and he wants to teach to this crowd, but he has a huge problem. There's so many of them that they can't see him or hear him. So he goes up to one of the fishermen, Peter, who is also called Simon in the story. He says, "Hey, can you help me out? I really want to say something to these people, but they can't see or hear me. Can we hop in your boat? You take me offshore a little bit, and I'll teach them, and you can bring me back in." And Peter, after a long night of working, you know, some of you might have fishermen in your family, or you've fished before. You know it's hard work. You know, constant work, maybe no sleep, long hours kind of thing. So Peter, at the end of a full shift, is like, "All right, man, I'll take you out in the boat again. It's my second home." So he takes him out, and Jesus teaches to this massive crowd. And after he's finished teaching, it's like the whole story narrows in on just Peter and Jesus. And it's like it's as if there's no one else in the world around them. And Jesus has this moment of seeing something in Peter, I really believe. And he looks at Peter and says, hey, throw your net overboard. Cast your net to catch some fish. Now, Jesus was a carpenter, so he was a bit handy, but he had no business telling Peter how to fish. Peter knew what he was doing. And at this time, the nets that they were using, they would fish at night because the fish would see the nets during the day. So they'd go out at night, hopes that the fish wouldn't see them, and they'd catch a bigger catch. And so in Peter's mind, he's like, hey, we've been all night fishing. This is the worst point in the day to be fishing. You want me to throw my net over? No. Go do some woodworking. Come on. Jesus is like, no. Throw your net over the side. And so Peter must have saw something in Jesus, something. So he throws the net over. And all of a sudden, the boat starts to go, whoop, because there's so much fish in their net. And starts to begin to tear. So he yells out to the people on shore, hey, come here, help me. I need your help. Bring your boats. Bring your nets. There's so much fish here. Get out here. And Jesus is like, yeah, I know I'm a carpenter, but I'm a fisher too. So they bring out their boats, they start to collect all this fish, and there's so much fish. This catch is so big, their boats are starting to sink. The water line is right at the top, and they're trying to get back into shore. They get their boats back in shore, get their fish off, and like I saw at Middle Cove Beach last Sunday, they start gutting their fish on the shore. And they're getting all cleaned up and just marveled at what they had just seen. And Peter goes up to Jesus and say, hey, you need to leave. He just saw something so overwhelming with this, being completely overwhelmed. He says, hey, I can't be around you. You need to leave. I'm not worthy of being next to you. Again, he sees something about Jesus. Maybe he's somebody connected to God. There's something about him, but I know that I'm not worthy to be around him. So he actually says, Jesus, you need to get out of here. Wow, so rude. He probably made the most money he's ever made in his life. He says, hey, get away from me. And Jesus, in classic Jesus fashion, looks at him and says, hey, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. In fact, what I'm going to do through your life is I'm actually going to do something even greater than what you've just seen. I'm going to help you fish for people. Now, hold up, Jesus. Fish for people? Something sounds illegal about that. I'm going to help you do something even greater than this. I'm going to help you fish for people. Such an interesting story, hey? If you put yourself in Peter's shoes, he's probably tired, not really understanding what's going on, right? Just wants to sleep, get a coffee, and fish again the next day. But he's completely overwhelmed by what he's just seen. So what do we make of this encounter between Jesus and Peter? Peter lived this long life so far, working extremely hard throughout the night to provide for his family so that they could live during the day, a truly admirable thing, but I really believe that when Jesus was in that boat with Peter, he saw something even greater. Not that being a fisherman is wrong or that it's not good enough. But I think he looked at Peter and saw the qualities in him, the things he had learned by fishing even, the work ethic, the risk that it takes in such an occupation. He saw all those qualities in Peter and said, hey, with me, you can do something even greater than what I've just shown you. I can exceed the expectations that you have for your life. What you're doing is great. You're working hard for your family. You're in this routine. You're trying to get paid so that your family can eat. All of that is great, but with me, you can do even greater than this. I can exceed the expectations for your life. And if we read about Peter's life throughout the Gospels and even a book called Acts, we can read that Peter has been one of the most foundational people that has brought us to where we are today as a church. He pointed many, many people to Jesus. Did he have a lot of mistakes? Absolutely. He's one of the most comical people because of the mistakes he's made. But he has led so many to believe in Jesus and actually helped lay the foundation for the rest of church history. That's what he became. Because in a boat with Jesus, Jesus looked at him and said, hey, what you're doing is awesome, but you can do even greater with me. See, I think in my own life, as I am in a routine, as I try to work as hard as I can to provide for my family, to even do work that I believe God has called me to do. As I try to be the best husband I can be, father, dog owner that I can be, I think sometimes I can get caught up with just trying to do that. Which, yes, is very admirable, 100%. But then I read this story of Peter with Jesus, and I think, man, if I was a little more intentional of partnering with Jesus, what really could happen? I think sometimes we all kind of get caught up in that. And listen, I get it. Our house is chaotic with 2 kids every day, so sometimes you're just living for 8 o'clock in the evening. I understand. So that you can have your bowl of popcorn and watch your TV show on Netflix. I get it. But if we got up in the morning and just took a moment and said, God, hey, can I partner with you today in what I'm already doing, what I'm trying to do really well, and let's see what happens here. Wow, what could happen? Because I believe that in a relationship with Jesus, he exceeds our expectations. But here's also the other thing he does. He helps eliminate our limitations. He exceeds our expectations, but he also helps eliminate our limitations. It's very relatable that Peter's first response to Jesus is, hey, get away from me. He sees a miracle. Jesus has done something absolutely magnificent through Peter, and Peter says, hey, get away from me. I'm not worthy of being around you. Because in that moment, Peter just felt all of his insecurities. I'm just a lonely fisherman trying to provide for my family. I can't do what you're asking of me. I'm not worthy of being around somebody who can do this. Get away from me. And so sometimes when we maybe step out and say, okay, God, use me for how you will today, my routine, and he does, we're like, oh, no. I did this, that, and the other thing yesterday. No, I can't do that. Or we start to think about every single label that someone has given us in our life that makes us feel like we're worthless, not capable of doing anything great. We're a mistake, maybe, that we'll never be good enough or own up to who we could be because we've heard that from someone else. And so the moment we have an opportunity to do something that exceeds our expectations, we kind of just crouch and say, no, Jesus. Go to the next person. Go, Greg Bowers, he's the one that you should use. And Peter feels it here. But here's the thing. Jesus, when he wants to partner with us and help us have those experiences that exceed our expectations, he doesn't say, hey, I need to clean you up. I need to change your personality a little bit. I need to get the polish out and, spend a little bit of time over here. This thing that you really are interested in, that doesn't really work for me, so you need to drop that. He doesn't do any of that. He looks at Peter and says, hey, you have so much work ethic. Hey, you're willing to take a risk every day to provide for your family because you could come home with nothing. Peter, you are faithful to the people that are important to you. He sees all of those beautiful things about Peter and says, hey, partner with me. And that's it. He says, follow me. And you'll see things even greater than this. So here's the thing. He exceeds our expectations, but he looks at us and he doesn't see the labels first. He doesn't see the mistakes first. He doesn't worry about all of that. He just says, hey, I created you for who you are. The fact that you love gaming, the fact that you love knitting, the fact that you love this, that, and the other thing, all of that, who you are, the job that you have, the things that are valuable to you, all of that I can use and exceed your expectations. Wow. He exceeds our expectations, and he helps to eliminate our limitations. I'm going to ask the band to come back. Lately, I've been finding, whether it's just being out more with kids or whatever that may be, I've been finding that I not necessarily bump into people that I went to high school or junior high with, but I just see them at distances. Not at the mall because I hate the mall, but like, if I go to soccer with my daughter, there's like another parent who I went to high school with. And this seems to be happening more and more lately. And the more and more that happens to me, I can be a little bit of a self-reflector. The more and more it happens to me, I start to think, man, where are they now? What are they up to? But I also think a lot about my relationship that I had with them in high school, whether there was no relationship at all or there was a major one. And I think a lot about, what could I have done different? A lot of those people, they're not following Jesus at all. A lot of them are having really hard times in life, maybe. And so a lot of times I think about, what could I have done differently to help make more of an impact in those lives? And the more and more I reflect, I'm picking up a common theme that I had when I was in high school and junior high. Is that I wrestled and probably still do wrestle with a lot of self-doubt. Where I walk into a space and think I'm not capable enough, I'm not good enough to do this. They don't want to hear this from me. I just want to blend in. And that was me in high school especially. Just want to blend in here. I had a very strong faith. I grew up in a youth group with Matt Joy, who was a pastor here for a long time. And I give him a lot of credit for who I am today and had a lot of great experiences I would never trade away. So don't get me wrong. But when I think about my school life, I could have been somebody who not necessarily is preaching all the time, but there's definitely opportunities that I walked away from to share who Jesus was because I doubted myself so much. And so often I think, what would have happened if I thought differently? That's limitations I put on myself. And a lot of these friends, they've gone, they got their own life and all of that, and I pray for them and all those things, and if an opportunity can come where I can share Jesus with them, awesome. But the hard part of it is some of them are actually no longer with us. And that's really hard to wrestle with. Because I see it as missed opportunities or whatever, just because I didn't think I was good enough. When Jesus looks at me and says, Steve, I see this so beautiful that I created you. And I want to partner with you to exceed anything you could ever dream of. And I think that's something a lot of us wrestle with. And I'm not going to get anyone to raise your hand to say that you wrestle with this. No, this is a very personal thing. But there's probably some in the room who you put limitations on yourself. You're constantly saying you're not good enough to do that, or you're incapable of doing this. Or maybe to think about, Jesus working alongside of you, you start to think about all of those labels that you ever heard, maybe from your parents or from a sibling or someone who you were in a relationship with, or someone in high school even. You think about all the labels of worthless and all of these things, and that's the first reaction you have whenever you think about Jesus ever wanting to be in a relationship with you. One, I want you to know you're not alone, because I wrestle with that too. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of money there's a lot of people in this room that do the same thing. Here's my challenge for you this morning. Just find a little bit encouragement in Peter. Even though he said, get away from me, Jesus looked at him and said, hey, don't be afraid. See all the beautiful qualities in you. And what I see happening through you will absolutely blow your mind, and you can do it because I love you and I created you for you. So find encouragement in that this morning to help kind of push past some of those labels. That's not going to happen this morning. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a lifelong journey. But reminders of who Jesus thinks you are can constantly help you get rid of what you think everybody else thinks of who you are, or what people have told you who you are. And it can be a very freeing thing that when you partner with Jesus, you'll see some of the most beautiful experiences that are way better than getting a new puppy. That will exceed your expectations and go way beyond the limitations that you put on yourself. And so this morning, there's things you can do as you on the daily in your routine that can help with this. A classic pastor thing that everybody will tell you is read your Bible, and I understand that this is probably the most boring book in the world. I get it. I really struggle. I have a Bible that's connected to an app to help me stay interested in it. I get it. It's not the first book you want to read, and if you don't read books, it's certainly not the first book you want to read. But if you try, maybe do it with somebody. Get the app that I have that can help you with it. There's really beautiful stories like the story of Peter and Jesus that can encourage you in that day to say, hey, despite what anyone has called you or told you who you are, you can do crazy things in a partnership with Jesus because he created you, he loves you, and he's chosen you to do amazing things, despite what anyone said about you or what you say about yourself. Prayer is another big one. Taking a moment every morning to say, hey, Jesus, I'm having all these thoughts. I'm reminded of all my limitations. Will you give me some freedom from that today as I partner with you to do what it is you will, as I go to work, as I try to raise my kids, as I clean up my dog's accidents. And the other thing that Spruce does so well and has been doing well for so long is get yourself into a beautiful, genuine community. Surrounded by people who see the beautiful parts in you and remind you of that on the daily. Get into a small group, go to a beach fire on a Sunday night. All of those things, they help you be surrounded by people who see you as Jesus sees you, and you're constantly reminded of that, and not the limitations that you have or the labels that you've been given. So that's things you can do on the daily. This morning, as the team just plays a song, I invite you to maybe reflect in a number of ways. So maybe if you're someone who, those limitations, those labels are something that's really resonating with you this morning, take some time to pray to Jesus and say, hey, I really need some help with this. Can you help me have some freedom here? I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to do that, but I know that you can catch an amazing amount of fish, so you can help me get rid of this label. So please help this morning. Or maybe that's something that you don't necessarily struggle with, but you're wondering, hey, how can I be more intentional in partnering with Jesus on the daily as I go to work or school or whatever that may be? Reflect on the relationships that you have, the things that are a part of your routine, and say, hey, how can I partner with Jesus and be more intentional? Or maybe you're here this morning and you don't even believe in who Jesus is. And maybe this morning you're hearing a little bit about a Jesus and a God who doesn't say, hey, you got to get cleaned up first before you follow me. He actually says, I love you for who you are. I created you the way that you are. The likes, the interests, all of those things that are a part of you, I love that. And I just so desire to be in a relationship with you. And so maybe this morning you're saying, hey, instead of saying, get away from me, I want to start asking questions. Or maybe start saying, hey, I want to start following him, maybe. And so if that's you, you can reflect on that during the song as well. So as the team leads the song, find yourself in one of those three ways and take the time to reflect on that. Before we do, I invite you to stand with me and we'll pray and the team will lead us. Father, I thank you so much for who you are. Lord, I thank you for amazing encounters through people like Peter. Where God, you look at them and despite whatever flaws people may have seen with Peter, God, despite maybe people looking at him and saying, hey, you're just a lowly fisherman, God, you saw something exceedingly more in his life. God, you took him just exactly how you created him and done amazing things. And God, this morning, you invite us to do the very same thing. So God, for the ones in the room that, as they hear this, their labels, the limitations are the first thing that's coming to mind, Lord, I pray that they'd find freedom this morning. Lord, for the ones who are wanting to know, okay, how can I be more intentional? God, I pray you give them the next steps to do that. And God, for the ones that maybe aren't following you, Lord, I pray this morning that they would just be reminded or shown just the genuine love that you have for them and that you created them in the beautiful person that they are today. So God, I pray that you would just meet us where we are this morning as we take some time to reflect. We ask this in